how much should ebooks cost? And how can you define the real appropriate cost, price? We have heard in the morning statements like ebooks having ridiculously or insane prices in the English-speaking world. The situation is quite different in continental Europe, where we have quite a few markets with regulation on prices, with all kinds of other factors that discriminate against ebooks, like value-added tax being very different for ebooks as compared to printed books, where you have very often preferential rates, making a difference of up to 20% on top of the price of a book. So there are lots of factors that have it that most likely pricing is different in Europe as compared to the English-speaking world. And I have the pleasure to welcome a very high-level round of speakers here with me. I start to my left with Cora Stephan, who is living in Frankfurt. She's a German author doing both non-fiction and fiction, and who is also doing her own ebooks, as far as I could learn. Next to her is Jesus Badenes, the publisher of Planeta, the largest publishing group in Spain and also in Latin America. To my right, Eric Marbeau, who is the director of digital and ebooks at Gallimard in France. And also to my right, Stefano Mauri of GEMS, Gruppo Editoriale Mauri Spagnol, the third largest group of publishers in Italy, and also president, I guess, of distribution platform for ebooks, eDigita. While I start with Cora, asking her about what is the perspective and the expectation of a writer when it comes to the pricing of ebook and to royalties and all those questions. I just, for your comparison, have made an overview of all kinds of book prices, print and digital, in a number of markets. This is where we are currently. And from there, the evolution, the emerging ebook markets will take shape. But to start with Cora, as an author who is paid royalties in percentages of the retail price, what do you prefer? A higher price, which gives you higher royalties per item sold, or lower price in the expectation of selling more and becoming ever richer?
Yes, well, becoming rich with books is not really very, very easy for authors. And I know that many of my colleagues will disagree with me when I say ebooks are German ebooks are much too expensive. And I do think that there is a hidden strategy of publishers and authors and booksellers to keep ebooks expensive, so not to have too strong a competition by ebooks. German authors, well, most of German authors seem to be timid and are very loyal to their publishers, and they don't seem to realize that it might be a good idea to think of a lower price for ebooks and a higher rate of interest. The fight is on, but it is not a fight yet, because the publishing firms have sort of agreed on a 20% rate for authors on ebooks.
20% discount on average.
Yes, yes. So which is, I think this is ridiculous. If ebooks are very expensive, people are not likely to buy them, as the market in Germany is fairly conservative. We don't have many ebook readers. We don't have many people who like to have their iPad with them. And they still think that a book which you hold in your hand, which has a certain weight, which fits into your bookshelf, has to have a higher price than just this ephemeral thing called an ebook. So they won't really go for German ebooks, and we have a global market. If I buy e-books. I buy English e-books because I read English. I'm not speaking English very well. It's a little bit rusty, but I read English a lot and fairly fluently. So of course I go for the lower price and for a book which has not been translated into German, because the translator's business is a very hard business, and often translations are not very good. So what I'm going to say, trying to keep it short, because this is a subject which is of very big interest for me and for some of my colleagues as well, and of course for the whole market. Because authors don't realize they pay for the overhead costs of publishing firms, which have still a lot to do with getting real books to real booksellers. Me as an author, of course, I say, what I'm delivering you is already an e-book. So why 20%? For what? As I'm not paying, or you don't have to pay the bookseller anymore. So, like I say, I'm sitting between two fires, and of course, every author, I'm sorry, every author in Germany loves his little bookseller just around the corner. So we are loyal, we're timid, and we don't really set much hopes into e-book business, and I think we are wrong.
So altogether, if I understand your point correctly, we have three different main factors where pricing plays a role. One is how much is the cost of an e-book for the buyer, for the reader. And your argument is when this is too high, you don't sell books. The second factor is how much, what percentage of royalties can you receive as a writer. But the third factor, when you mentioned the small bookseller next door, we also have to bear in mind the whole ecology of the book and reading environment, where again pricing is a key for its shape, for its wealth.
Sure, but as long as, yes, I know I'm a little bit in a fighting mood today. As long as booksellers don't sell my books, I don't see why I should be concerned with their business. That is a problem that in the market at the moment, booksellers don't do what they are supposed to do, being a gatekeeper, being somebody who shows people what you can find in the sphere of books. And as publishing firms pay 40 to 50% to booksellers, of course the authors think, hey, where am I in all this business?
Stefano, as a publisher, you want to pay as much as possible to the writer, I suppose. So what's your take on this?
Well, I think it's very interesting this moment because we are dealing with pure retailer. I mean Amazon, Apple, and all the online stores, very, very close to the market, and people who only and always think of the customer satisfaction. As a publisher, I must say we have always taken care also of the author satisfaction, which is includes many things. It goes from psychological and creative coaching to advances and financial sustain. And I must say that when it happens that I have to pay $1 million of royalties to an author because of his success, I'm happy because I know this will help the author maybe leave the work, the job he's doing to make a living and concentrate on his talent, a talent that the readers recognize. I don't think that discounting everything takes us to the best possible world in publishing. I make one example. It's 13, 14 years now that in UK the netbook agreement has been abandoned, and I was listening on Sunday night. There was this excellent anniversary party for Ullstein in Berlin, and Ken Follett said, unfortunately, I was one of the promoters of the breach of NBA, and I did not realize I was that we were delivering the publishing business in the hands of supermarkets to the damage of bookseller first, publisher then, and later on authors. So I think we always have to take care of the balance. On one side, customer satisfaction. On the other side, we must know that without authors, there will not be customer satisfaction anymore, and the authors must be sustained for their living. In Italy, according to my figures,
Can we switch over to können wir die andere Präsentation haben?
See, this is the company we founded 1 year ago is today the leading distributor of e-books in Italy. And very much surprisingly, the actual figures and the budget figures are not very far. I think that it's like winning the lottery, because when we started there wasn't the market. So I'm very surprised that the budget has been followed so well. You can see that curve on week 29, 31 is the end of July, the beginning of August. It means e-books are mostly a tool for travelers. So when people travel, buys more e-book for that reason. Anyway, and if we can move on, because okay, Edigita has 5,700 titles, 64 imprints, of which 35 are independent, so are not among the founders of the company. And it deals with 37 retailers. According to a survey we recently made, it delivers 65% of the books on partners retailers and 55% on independent retailers. So is leading the distribution before the landing of Apple and Amazon, which Apple just landed, and we will see when Amazon. Well, the average price was very low at the beginning because people were testing their machines, their readers, and they did that preferably with the books at a lower price. Then it raised it, and then it is going down again, and today is about 37% less than the paper book. 37% less, with 21 points of VAT instead of the 4 points for books, means that if the VAT was the same of paper books, it's half of the price. And I don't think we can go much lower, because despite the fact that the perception of the people when buying a physical good is that the value is in the physical side, and so they are not willing to pay much for an intangible e-book, 50% of the cost of the book are not on the physical side, they are on the intangible side. So it's, I think we must continuously find a balance between what people want and the survival of publishing as we know it, because in many cases, for instance, I met in May in Paris Bob Young, founder of Lulu.com, the largest self-publishing operation in the world, 10,000 new books a year. And he says, when I founded it, I thought I was going to have bestseller in my large publication scale. And after 10 years, I haven't found one literary bestseller. And so I recognize that there is a part of the job that is precisely what publishers do, which I call the last mile, to help the author reach its target, its readers, which is not only marketing, it's also helping him with the work he's writing, with the words he's using, with the way he's positioned as a person in the country. So publishers, so that's why I defend, I mean, a balance in which publishers and authors can survive, because otherwise you know, we are talking of a different work. And going back to UK, it happened lately, a little too frequent, that we bought a book, the rights of a British book, and after 1 year, this new literary writer doesn't have a British publisher. So we cannot publish it because there are not a British publisher editing it. It's something that never happened in the past, and I think it's due to the fact that the British publishing doesn't have the necessary margins to risk on new authors as it used to.
But nevertheless, the book is not an isolated item. It's in a digital ecology embedded, and most of the other goods that are traded over the internet are coming to the consumer at a significant discount. Now, the case of France is perhaps the most radical, insofar as France was very quick in even passing a law to stabilize price levels, and France is also spearheading a lobbying in Brussels to bring VAT for e-books down to the same level as for the printed book. So everybody is in the publishing world in France is working hard to keep prices up. Can you sustain that in an environment where all other goods are heavily discounted? Eric?
Yeah, sure. In France, we face a very specific case, whereas, well, as you saw, our ebooks seem to be higher priced than in other markets. This is when we take a comparison to novelties, where we face 15 euros average in comparison to the 9.99 we all know in the United States. But just to respond to what you say, Rudiger, the law that will be passed by the French government, its objective is not to stabilize prices. It's to make publishers and authors more comfortable in working in the digital era. Basically saying the publisher will be the only one to fix prices and can therefore maintain its commercial operations, working on what we believe at Gallimard is a product life cycle for a book. So when we compare ebooks priced at 15 euros with other markets, we really need to look at, okay, why is that? We may have premium prices on novelties, but if you look around, you will see that French publishers are working hard on their backlist titles to propose ebooks on lower prices. And so we see that we have different populations in a growing ebook customer population in France. Those that go for free books, as we've all seen in our respective markets. Those that will just have bought an e-reader or will just have tested iBooks and will want to say, okay, I'm not sure I really want to read digital. Maybe should I try first on a free book, or maybe should I try on a book that I'm just paying $1.99 or €1.99? And if I'm convinced, then hey, maybe I'm ready to go further and put the price that we as publishers believe is fair for the book. Fair for us, fair for the author. What we also have to face in France, which I believe is a specific, and you will tell me in Italy or in Spain if it's different, we actually deal with our authors so that their royalty rates are fixed on the list price, not on net revenues. This implicates that most authors are very sensitive to the list price we're fixing because they know exactly what they will be earning, which isn't the case in net revenues. So that also takes part in the publisher's reflection on, okay, how do we price a book?
Kann ich die Technik nur bitten, die andere Präsentation wieder mit den Preisen aufzuschalten, dann haben wir das als Illustration, danke. So what's your navigation between those two perspectives and strategies, encouraging the market to develop and keep the level?
Okay, going back also to to the two questions that we've been asked. I will start with the second one, which is who sets the price for an ebook. And I think the price is, in this case, will be set by consumer, by readers. And I said so because, that's general economic theory, supply and demand. In a fragmented market, and the publishing market is a fragmented one, prices are set by the demand. And I say it's fragmented, and it's fragmented all over the world. If you take, for example, what's happening in the States, you see that between the 3 or 5 major publishers, the 3 major publishers account for less than 40% of the market. If you take on ebook, like just Kindle and Nook, they account for 87% of the market. So you have a market in which publishers account for an average of 15%, and you have e-retailers that account for 40% each. One 62, the other one 25. So who sets the price? It seems difficult to argue the question that publishers have much to do on pricing. Second question that I want to, I am recognizing that publishers as a whole, we do a very lousy role because it seems that we are in the middle of a conspiracy to maintain prices very high. And I fire back the question, which is, what prices are we talking about? What's the price for reading an ebook? Are we talking about the iPad price? This price that has made Apple the second market capitalization company in the world, just behind ExxonMobil? Anybody is arguing that for reading an ebook, that now we are talking about prices, has to pay 800 euros in Europe just for having 3G or whichever? Are we talking about internet access? Are we talking about those things that we pay to telecom companies? Or are we just talking about the content price? Because if we are talking about content price, that's a question. But if we are talking about all integrated price, the question is much diverse. And I think we are losing scope of the question. Once again, don't worry. Prices will be set by consumers. Why is that? In Spain, for example, the 3 major publishers account for less than 30% of the market. And if you take 5, we account for less than 40% of the market. So if you want to take this 66 or 70% of the market, you need 50 publishers. Thinking that 50 publishers will have aligned strategies on ebook pricing, that's basically miraculous. That's not going to happen. What is happening in Spain? As in Rudiger's excellent graph, you can see. Well, you cannot see because you don't see which title is published by which house. But what I can see, because I know the houses that are publishing the titles, is that each of them applies different discount on ebook versus trade publishing. What is going to happen? That some of them will be more successful than others. What is going to happen next? That Amazon is going to become a publisher themselves, which is its own ebook pricing strategy. What is going to happen next? That everybody will look at what makes sense and what doesn't make sense in the market. So the question is, don't worry that much about ebook pricing fixed by publishers, because this is not going to be the truth. On royalties and on your fighting strategy before, I just have to say that publishers pay advances. We don't pay only royalties, we pay advances. When we pay advances, that means that we make a commitment on some author. In Spain, I don't know some other cases, but in Spain, out of 3 times, on 2 times, we are wrong. We take risk, and 2 out of 3 times, we are wrong. What does it mean? That royalties is not what we pay to authors. What we pay to authors is advances that we are not going to recover. Well, it is not recovered fully. What is going to happen? So that publishers have a value proposition, which I think is still very, very successful, will be in the internet market, because internet is like, it's full of content, and I agree, it's full of content, not only books, but many millions of books, and some strategies, some advertising strategies and some publishing strategies will be more successful than others. And authors will be able to recognize which one is the best career path for them. Only one example. On Apple, back on Apple again. Music market. iPod, the iPod has been extremely successful cash machine before the iPhone and the iPad. Why is that? Because it has accrued an enormous percentage of value to the machine, to the iPod. Conversely, the content, the songs, have been priced at 99. In this case, the content has been the complement for the main the main economic article, that has been the iPod. I just tell you one thing. I mean, don't worry about paying overheads of publishers. Worry more about paying overheads of Apple or Amazon, or worry at least equally on all overheads. I mean, you still have to pay overheads. That's it.
We are quickly getting into pricing as a not fixed system, but a very dynamic system of parameters. And I want to go back to you, Eric, because you mentioned two things. One is you started, perhaps France is more active in digitizing backlists than most other countries at this point. And you mentioned that pricing in the backlist would be a different thing. One question I want to explore with you. And the second thing is also, you mentioned earlier to me that you start considering changing prices over the life cycle of a book. In the past, we had a very rigid system of basically two pricing levels for the printed book, the hardcover and the paperback. What is this idea of a life cycle publishing pricing?
Well, I don't have a recipe for all of us, but we all acknowledge that now we have the faculty to change prices whenever we want, and to have prices help promote an ebook when he maybe is close to nearing the end of a first life cycle. So of course, publishers like Gallimard, who both are consistent in publishing paper books and print books and in publishing ebooks, we consider on, okay, how can we maximize awareness for a title, both on paper and on ebook, considering that we have some populations that are strictly paper, populations of readers, and some populations that are strictly ebook, and some populations that read both. Okay, and how do we address this title so as to create more awareness to this title to one of these new populations? And I can't say we have enough feedback to really present conclusions to this, but this is what we're working on. And the price is, of course, one of the main strings we can pull out so as to develop this price awareness. But this is possible only if we also have a very good, if we work well with our distributors. Because of course distributors will also be very important so as to reflect changes in pricing, which isn't such the case in France today.
Cora, you mentioned in your first statement that authors were very loyal animals to their publishers.
Yes, like Jesus said, they pay advances occasionally.
But now you start to have more options, because in the old world it was obvious that you would go with one publisher as your main publisher and do all the business with that one partner. Is this, in your expectation, is this to continue, or will you start to be a very volatile animal, moving between your publisher, doing some direct stuff with Amazon as an author? I guess you yourself started to digitize a backlist title of yourself, so you started to behave in the new ways. What's your expectation?
Well, of course, I have to be volatile. Like I said, authors are loyal, authors love their publishers, but still Stefano says we need a new partnership, because not all publishers are loyal to their authors. Of course, it's good if you get money and your publisher still doesn't sell your books. Some of publishing firms do something for their authors if they sell enough books, but not if they are sort of on the middle level. We in Germany have a big discrepancy between authors who sell 2,000, 3,000 or 4,000 books and all the others who sell hundreds and thousands. And between these two classes, there is nothing. So authors do have to be volatile, because publishing firms are not as loyal as they used to be. We all know these stories about the great German authors and their relationship to Unseld, to Siegfried Unseld, to this great publishing personality of Suhrkamp. But this is fading, not only because we don't have these personalities anymore, we don't have these kind of authors anymore, because we don't have this kind of literary culture anymore. It's more widely spread. And if an author realizes that his publishing firm is more interested in a book which sells, which is for mass consummation. Correct me, my English is really
mass consumption,
very,
yes.
very rusty, yes. Which is fine, everybody can read, so let's everybody have a book which he likes to read. But then all the other stuff is not interesting anymore, and it is especially not interesting anymore for Vertrieb. What's the word for Vertrieb?
Distribution.
For distribution. So our book, which we have worked for, our content, doesn't find its way into the bookstores. You know, I could talk about this at length, but I won't do this, obviously, because I don't want to get you gelangweilt. No, I have to be more volatile because my publishers are not as loyal to me as well, because my backlist is going away. I don't have a backlist anymore in the near future. So of course I'm going to do this for myself.
Is this the new partnership, Stefano, that the publisher is primarily taking care of the most recent titles of the author and allows or even encourages the author to take care of the backlist by him or herself? Or
well, I think that the problem is generalization. There are different authors' situations. There are different publishers. My opinion...
but let's speak about mid-list fiction, which is where a big chunk of the business here is
there are some mid-list fiction authors whose backlist sells. There are other mid-fiction authors whose backlist simply does not sell because it decays earlier. It depends on the subject, on the way it's written, on what came out after, which other authors competed with that author after that. So I think it's very difficult to generalize. One thing is we should keep in mind is not to think of a publisher as always the same kind of figure. I mean, the publisher can never sleep. As she said, and it's correct, there is not anymore, for instance, in Italy, the literary community made of few literary publishers, few journalists, which influence the taste of all the others. There is no more. It's more a peer-to-peer war where people go in internet and trust more normal people with the same taste rather than the last review on the newspapers. Of course, publishers have to help, as always, the author to reach their market in new ways. I mean, publishers have to be and live in the web because that is where 60% of the motivation of buying raises from the people. And so there are ways to take care of that. It's risky, the world is changing. I'm so happy, frankly, to see that the job is changing because it's boring to work always in the same way. So we have a fascinating challenge and we have to go further. I agree with Jesus about the balances. For instance, one thing that puzzles me a lot is in the day in which we will have a music industry situation where there is practically one distributor, and that one distributor maybe becomes also the #1 publisher, there will not be pluralism anymore. And I'm quite worried. I mean, for 400 years, publishers relied on a technology that anyone could use, anyone could produce, anyone could read, and tomorrow it might happen that 60, 70, 80% of the books, of the content read, has to go through a proprietary system, through a needle eye of a proprietary system. I don't think this is correct. I think there should be interoperability as by law, like happens in many other fields in the new technology. So I think it's also young, and rules have to be designed to protect pluralism, because it's what is where really new authors and content grow.
This is, if I'm not all too wrong, emerging almost as a red line for the whole day of this conference, this call for regulation in order to sustain diversity and openness in the business. That's very, very remarkable, I guess. But this one player has been mentioned over and over, Amazon. And when we speak today very normally of the long tail, that notion of the long tail in book selling and music selling has been labeled as such only a few years ago by that essay from Chris Anderson. And only a few years in the development, we find out that on the one hand, this is a very important, a very strong characteristic of that new digital market. But on the other hand, critics have it that they say at the end of the day, there's only one player who really takes advantage of that long tail, and that is Amazon.com. As a publisher of international reach and of considerable size, you find yourself in that strange situation to work, of course, with Amazon as your partner in selling, and to compete with Amazon because they can take over part of the relationship that you used to have with the author. How do you behave in this? Because that's also a struggle about who has the upper hand in defining the price of the book.
Yes, and we see it as an opportunity. In fact, there is nothing new. In markets like in Italy and in Spain, like for example, Stefano is selling books through Mondadori bookshops, and still they compete in publishing. So that's something that has happened. In Spain happens the same thing. I mean, we have Casa del Libro that sells books of our competitors, and still we struggle with them for keeping our authors. In Amazon is nothing new. It's something well done in the sense that they are very good promoters of backlist titles. But backlist titles, when I joined the industry like 12 years ago, represented much more proportion of sales than today. So probably if Amazon has had an opportunity, it's because the traditional system was putting less focus on backlist titles. But Amazon is not the only one and will not be. I mean, this is an emerging market. And this is recognizing that for titles with a small rotation, e-commerce is more efficient than having books sitting on the shelves without moving. So that's something which is going to happen. And I guess that in Italy, Amazon has some competitors. In Spain, they will. They have. In fact, they just started. And the thing is not that much about competition, but that much about what somebody is doing is willing to lose in terms of gaining market share. So I guess that once again, we have some things to worry, or at least some references to think about, which is some other industries. Like for example, do we want to happen in our markets with books, same things that we are seeing in audiovisual, in movies, in our books? I don't know. I mean, it's perfect competition what they are claiming, what they really want. I mean, no. I mean, in Spain, if you want to have a blockbuster in terms of movies, then you have to carry 10 more titles, which are titles that are basically substituting national titles. I guess that books are not the same than shoes, although somebody could tend to think that they are. I don't think this is an e-commerce thing. I think this is more a cultural debate. And I don't think that the States is in a bright situation in terms of e-book retail. I mean, we've seen what has happened to Borders. Somebody could say that was overexpansion and mismanagement, whichever. The thing is that a big chain that used to sell books is not open, is no longer open. So I guess that and this happens in this case with the presence of a company which is clearly subsidizing some aspects of their business. Do we think that this is the Salvation Army? I don't think so. So I think that, no, I think that there is much to think about. I mean, I like competition very much. I like transparent competition, and I think that everybody will welcome competition. And if in some aspect of the business system, some new company is very efficient, good for them. We will work with them. If somebody basically tries to steal the ball, if you want, with no very transparent practices, then we cannot welcome that. So I guess that it's something like we cannot become simplistic. I mean, there's a lot more in play.
I have been instructed to not